We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Monday edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix. You are listening to the Monday Mashup. It is the 18th of March. We are just about out of Pisces. Certainly Mercury has moved forward and is moving on, crawling out of the primordial swamp and ooze that has been lounging in for the last 3.5 weeks. Can I get an amen for Mercury moving forward? Mercury retrograde Pisces, very tricky. It's a tricky Mercury retrograde. Over the weekend, speaking of Mercury retrograde, there was a player, professional football player by the name of Dante Stallworth. I guess we could just call this Dante's Inferno. And Miami, I think, might qualify as Dante's Inferno. So go with me here for a second. This weekend, on the 16th of March, Dante Stallworth was flying over the city of Miami in a hot air balloon. Sounds quite pleasant, doesn't it? You're up there. It's probably warm. You get to see the Atlantic. It's beautiful, and there's all the people and greenery and the colorful kind of cityscape of Miami swirling below you. A mosaic of sensory appreciation. Maybe you're up there with a really cute woman, in Dante's case. I think that's the case. Perhaps a little glass of wine or some Cristal, and boy, living the life. Well, guess what happened, Mr. Stallworth? All of a sudden, that balloon decided to take a dive south and wound up crashing into some power lines. So you say to yourself, well, this happens. People ride hot air balloons. Every now and then they crash. He happens to be an NFL player. He's getting some news. He's okay. He's got some injuries, but he's okay for the most part. Well, 4 years ago, almost to the day, on March 14th, not March 16th, 2 days off, probably make 1 day exception for leap year, which was last year, 2012. So we have really 1 day. There's a 1 day difference, almost to the day. Dante Stallworth was driving through the streets of Miami, the same city, the same guy, early in the morning, and he wound up hitting a pedestrian and killing a pedestrian. And he was found to be driving under the influence of alcohol. He wound up being suspended from the league for, I believe, at least a year. And he also wound up paying restitution to the man's family. So here we go, 4 years later, under the sign of Pisces, in the same city of Miami, Dante Stallworth falls from the sky and hits power lines. Now, let me tell you, if that guy is not hearing some kind of call in his life by this time, I don't know what it's going to take him. All I know is if I was Dante Stallworth, I would not set foot in Miami ever again. So here in Austin, it is a beautiful day. It's gorgeous. The sun is out, and we are heating up. It's getting warmer and warmer. Last night was probably about 70 degrees for most of the night. South by Southwest happened. It's over. Not a chemtrail in the sky while South by Southwest was happening. Not a one. You wonder why? Well, I thought they would actually use the chemtrails to spread their contagion, because what you want is a bunch of people going off to different parts of the world, bringing whatever they picked up in Austin, because that's where people come from all over the world to take part in South by Southwest. But that's not the case, and I think I figured this out. The reason why it didn't happen is because South by Southwest is loaded with journalists, loaded with radio people, bloggers, and you name it, video cameras. And I think that a naked and brazen display of chemtrail activity could have gotten some attention. And I just think they didn't really want that attention to take place, not during South by Southwest. In the meantime, my good friends in California tell me that Northern California was a literal checkerboard, atmospheric checkerboard of chemtrail activity. I'm sorry to hear that. So today, the skies are blue, clear, it's warm, it's almost spring, and life is good. However, if you're living in Cyprus, life is not so good. If you're living in England, it might be even worse. So part of what we're going to do today is we're going to go down the rabbit hole and talk about Cyprus. It's a very important topic, more important than you might understand or know at this point. It's a domino effect, and it's a very small country, but the impact that Cyprus has on the global banking system could be titanic, to say the least. Real quick, before we get into Cyprus, has everyone seen that picture of Obama next to the Moroccan actor, Mehdi Ousmani? Has everybody seen that picture? So Mark Burnett, who is the producer of Survivor, has done a mini-series on the Bible. And this thing has really taken off. I mean, Neptune's in Pisces. What do you expect? So it's really taken off. Mark Burnett can basically take a poop and make $1 million off of it right now. I mean, he's got Survivor. He's got this massive mini-series. But then he tried to do one or two other things that weren't really all that successful. But this mini-series in the Bible is getting lots of eyeballs. He's married, by the way, to Roma Downey, the Irish actress who played an angel on TV for quite a while. I looked up Roma Downey's net worth. I couldn't help it. I mean, it's right there on the internet. She's worth over 10 million pounds alone. This is apart from Mark Burnett's vast fortune from being a mega producer of Survivor. And I'd say that the Burnett-Downey duo is doing A-okay. Anyway, there on TV, well, we're seeing the story of the Bible unfold just prior to Easter. And last night, there was a character. Well, the character was the devil. And he was played by a Moroccan actor named Mehdi Ousmani. The guy is a dead ringer for Obama, okay? And if you go to you can look it up online, but I put it on Facebook today. And, here we are. I think the moon is in Gemini. Jupiter's in Gemini. We're still getting that crazy doppelganger Gemini energy. And Burnett had the stones to cast this guy as the devil. Really interesting. You can deduce have your own deductions around this, what you think it means. Maybe it's some form of, brazen truth-telling, or maybe it's really, some kind of programming. I mean, certainly it's programming. I mean, he's a producer. That's what he does.
But it's fascinating. This guy looks exactly like Obama. Look it up. Check it out. It's very interesting. Very interesting. It must have been Obama Day yesterday because I got a bunch of Obama stuff that came to me. Also, on my Facebook page, I put up a post. By the way, you can follow me on Facebook or join me, or because there's a whole scene going on Facebook. People talk, people chat. We get a lot of good conversations. A lot of the people that are in the chat room hang out on Facebook and just bring a plethora of their own information. And it's a pretty cool environment, to be honest with you. Anyway, yesterday was Obama Day, and somebody sent me the email, this video that I put up on Facebook, and it's Obama doing his State of the Union, 2013 inaugural State of the Union. And there's a scene where his left hand kind of goes like almost in and out of, not even focus, but almost in and out of solidity. And then they focus on his head, who does all this weird morphine, and it's almost like he's a hologram. That's what we're watching, is a hologram. Fascinating stuff. There's something, there's something going on with Obama that is way beyond, I think, what most people can comprehend. Way beyond it. And the reason I say that is because if you look back into some of the kind of, tiny historical snippets, vignettes, anecdotes of who Obama is, and people that actually wind up coming in contact with him versus the people, like, say, at Columbia who never saw him, who never identified him. And there were quite a few there, some of them quite active. Wayne Allen Root, a.k.a. War, was a big man on the Columbia campus back then, and he did not see Obama. He did not know about Obama. And this is a guy that was deeply connected. He ran for vice president, I think, for presidency on the Libertarian Party. I think this was 8 years ago. So, if he would have known about Obama on campus, if there was a guy, it probably would have been Wayne Allen Root, who made a lot of money, by the way, being a speculator forecaster in Las Vegas betting, especially for football, doing football lines and stuff like that. So the guy he's a gadfly and he's connected. Didn't know Obama. This came up recently that on the eve or on the days just before his trip to Israel, there was an Israeli who went to Columbia, again connected. Didn't know Obama. Didn't see him. Never heard of him. However, there are people that did see him, did know him, and there are individual stories that pop up from time to time. One of the more interesting ones was the postman in Chicago. Some of you may know this story. If not, I'll fill you in. A postman in Chicago used to deliver mail to the parents of Bill Ayers in Chicago. And Bill Ayers' father was an energy magnate. He was involved in at a high level with a number of public utilities in Chicago. So Bill Ayers comes from capitalist stock. However, his father apparently was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. Fascinating. Here's a guy that makes, hundreds of thousands of dollars off of exploiting resources and is a socialist. I mean, you wonder why the world is so fucked up sometimes. You get these people with these strange double agendas. I mean, can't they be consistent with their own agenda? Of course not. That would make too much sense. So anyway, I'm digressing. The postman used to deliver mail to the Ayers house. And Ayers' mom would stop and talk with him. And she would talk glowingly about this young man that was staying with them and that was headed off to an Ivy League school, and that how he would one day become president of the United States. And according to the guy, she talked about him like he was her own son. Ayers' old man said the same thing. spoke glowingly about this young man staying with them, that they were sponsoring, that he was going to go to the Ivy League school and be a big deal, be president of the United States. Then he also queried the guy about, how he felt about his job and if he felt like he was downtrodden and the man was putting the boot to him. The postman said, "No, I don't. Why should I? I like my job." So then one day the postman actually met Barack Obama. He met him. And the description was that he was arrogant. So I wasn't arrogant. He was supremely confident. Supremely confident. Almost to the point of arrogant. And he told this postman that he indeed was going to become president of the United States someday. So something is up with him. There's something about Obama. Maybe it's Freeman's assertion that he has the DNA of Akhenaten and carries the seed of Pharaoh. I don't know what is going on with Obama, but it reminds me in some ways of this movie called Demon, which I saw back in the 1970s, directed by Larry Cohen. If you have not seen the movie, I actually kind of recommend it. It goes by another title now. It's called God Made Me Do It. And I was fascinated by this movie when I was in high school. Larry Cohen, by the way, guerrilla filmmaker extraordinaire, broke all the rules while he made movies in New York. Didn't care about getting permits or licenses or anything like that. No insurance. Just go out, shoot the movie on the streets of New York. Recruit people, real time, have some stars, have a script, get it done. He did this film about these two brothers. And one brother is a police officer, played by Tony LoBianco, one of my favorite actors from the 70s. And he comes across a group of people who do insane things, like, shoot people from skyscrapers. And these aren't just any people, they're like CEOs of companies and stuff, right? And he'd ask them, well, why are you doing this? He said, well, God told me to. So he keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper into this strange world and winds up essentially hanging out with a star chamber. He finds a star chamber with all these really powerful, important people. And there he finds this guy. And this guy is like the guy who's been directing them the whole time and telling them what to do and how to do things. And it turns out that this guy is this story gets a little trippy. Turns out that he is the spawn of an alien and an Earth mother. And then it turns out that Tony LoBianco is his half-brother. So it's like, wow, well, this is interesting. It might even be his full brother. I don't know. But they're related, right? So then the demon guy basically reveals that he is a hermaphrodite and wants Tony LoBianco to do him so they can have like this super child and start the new race, the new super race. It's a weird scene, I got to tell you. And then LoBianco winds up taking him out. And then there's kind of a Matrix moment with Tony LoBianco, and he figures out, well, if I got all this power, what can I do? If I am that, what can I do? Anyway, I'm just going the long route and saying that there's something about that movie that somehow resonates with what's happening with Obama and this kind of energy that he circulates within the power structures. I've never seen anything quite like it. George Bush got it done only because George Bush was a puppet. People say that Obama's a puppet. I don't think Obama's a puppet. I don't think he's like George Bush. I think there's something else going on with him. All right, let's transition out of Obama. Let's talk about Cyprus. It's a big deal. And to give you, let's just start with a little bit of a background on Cyprus itself. And then we're going to get into what's happening there and why it's important to pay some attention. So Cyprus is kind of a fascinating place, just in terms of its proximity. It's an island off the coast of Greece. It has been at one time Grecian and at one time Turkish, and at other times many, many other things. In mythology, it's supposed to be the birthplace of Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. Aphrodite, of course, her correlative is Venus. And then Adonis is also supposedly to have been born in Cyprus as well, home to King Cinyras, Taucer, and, of course, Pygmalion. So one of the first colonies, one of the first groups of people that landed in Cyprus were the Phoenicians. It was about 8th century BC. And then in 708 BC, the Cypriots, or Cyprus, was ruled by Assyria for a century. And then the Egyptians came in and ruled them. And then the Persians came in and ruled them in 545. And then the Cypriots decided, hey, we'd had enough. And they joined the Greeks. And they led an unsuccessful revolt. And this was against the Achaemenid Empire. So even though they lost, Cyprus managed to retain a fair degree of autonomy. Well, guess what? Then in 333, it was conquered by Alexander the Great. Okay. So at that point, it became part of the Hellenistic Empire of Ptolemaic Egypt. And then in 56 BC, Cyprus was annexed by the Roman Republic. So it was then divided into eastern and western parts in 395. Cyprus became part of the East Roman, or the Byzantine Empire, and would remain part of it until the Crusades about 800 years later. Under Byzantine rule, the Greek orientation that had been prominent since antiquity developed a strong Hellenistic Christian character that continues to be a hallmark of the Greek Cypriot community. In 649, Cyprus suffered from devastating raids launched by Arab armies from the Levant, which continued for the next 300 years. Many were quick, practical raids, but others were large-scale attacks in which many Cypriots were slaughtered. And here is the key word, and great wealth carried off or destroyed. There are no Byzantine churches which survived from this period. Thousands of people were killed, and many cities, such as Salamis, were destroyed and never rebuilt. Byzantine rule was restored in 965 when Emperor Nikephoros II of Phocis scored decisive victories on land and sea. In 1191, during the Third Crusade, Richard I of England captured the island from Isaac Komnenos of Cyprus. So now Richard I of England. Now Cyprus has English influence in its history. He used it as a major supply base that was relatively safe from the Saracens. This is during the Crusades, so they're using Cyprus as kind of a launching island, okay? A year later, Richard sold the island. He sold the island. I love this. I love how this works. He sold the island to the Knights Templars, who, following a bloody revolt, in turn sold it to Guy of Lusignan. His brother and successor, Amalric, was recognized as King of Cyprus by Henry VI, Holy Roman Emperor. Following the death in 1473 of James II, the last Lusignan king, the Republic of Venice assumed control of the island. When the late king's Venetian widow, Queen Catherine Cornaro, reigned as figurehead, Venice formally annexed Cyprus in 1489, following the abdication of Catherine. The Venetians fortified Nicosia, that's a city in Cyprus, by building the famous Venetian walls and used it as an important commercial hub. Throughout Venetian rule, the Ottoman Empire frequently raided Cyprus. In 1539, the Ottomans destroyed Limassol, and so fearing the worst, the Venetians also fortified Famagusta and Kyrenia, both Cypriot cities. During the almost 4 centuries of Latin rule, there existed 2 societies on Cyprus. The first consisted of Frankish nobles and their retinue, as well as Italian merchants and their families. The second, the majority of the population consisted of Greek
Cypriots, serfs, and laborers, although a determined effort was made to supplant native traditions and culture, the effort failed. So apparently they've maintained some kind of thread throughout all of this. The Ottoman Empire in 1570, a full-scale Ottoman assault with 60,000 troops brought the island under Ottoman control despite stiff resistance by the inhabitants of Nicosia and Famagusta. 20,000 Nicoseans were put to death, and every church, public building, and palace was looted. Again, take note of that, okay? So we had huge amounts of wealth being taken out before this, and another huge tranche of wealth being taken out by the Ottomans. Can you see a pattern here? You know, Cyprus is a place that gets looted throughout history, okay? It's the way it is. It's got some kind of geomagnetic/karmic anchor in this whole concept of being overrun and looted. And guess what? It's happening again. And this time it is not by some invading force. No, it's happening through the international banking community. This is exactly what is happening. The same thing, except it's not. They're not going in, and they're not taking Cyprus by storm with troops. No, what they're doing and what they've decided to do is, now here we're getting into real time. Cyprus, $1 billion in debt. Imagine that. $1 billion in debt, because this is money that they'd already borrowed. Just like all these other countries in Europe, they don't produce shit. They don't produce shit. They don't do anything. They have no GNP. The only thing that Cyprus has is probably fishing, olives, and tourists, okay? It is a microcosm of Greece. These are tourist countries. Most of Western Europe doesn't produce a damn thing, which is why they're in trouble. You cannot continue to borrow money unless you produce something and then sell those things you produce so that you can pay the debt from which you borrowed. It's just the way it goes. It's basic economics. But there's no expansion happening here. All the expansion in the world is happening in third world countries. It's happening in China. It's happening in the BRIC nations. That's why they are prosperous. That's why they're getting money. That's why they're building. And that's why these countries are dying. And what happened was, is now they got this $1 billion debt, they have to somehow get a loan. Well, guess what? Hey, we're going to raise our hands. Come on, we need more money. So they borrow $1 billion. So they're borrowing $1 billion to pay off the $1 billion that they already owe. Boy, that's smart. Now, how are they going to pay that $1 billion off? Now they're $2 billion in debt. So apparently, what's been taking place in Cyprus is kind of what happened in some ways with Iceland. And Iceland was offered, the people of Iceland were offered rates on their savings that were higher to invest in, I believe it was called i-save. And i-save essentially got looted. All those accounts got looted, and there was no more money. It was kind of a Madoff scheme. And it was put in play by the British and also by the president of Iceland at that time and his wife. And what happened in Cyprus is that the rates of savings that they offered, especially for people in England, was much better than what people in England were getting in England. And so if you've got inflation at, say, about a 20% clip, and you've got your savings and it's only getting 6%, you're losing money every single year, right? You can't keep up with inflation. I don't know what Cyprus was offering, but it was certainly more than what the people in the UK were getting. So there's a lot of British money in the Cyprus banks. Well, guess what happened? The Cyprus banks decided that they were going to levy every saver under 100,000 pounds a 10% tax on whatever money they have. Think about that. This is to make up for the shortfall. Now, the Cypriots Well, the Cypriot government says, well, this is what we had to do. Because if we didn't do this, well, you lose your money. So be thankful that we were only taking 10% of it. That's their premise. Meanwhile, nobody ever told these savers that they had a choice. Hey, you either can pay the tax or you can take your money out. They didn't have that choice. And when people went to take their money out, especially there on the ground, the banks are closed in Cyprus, by the way. You can't get your money out. The ATMs weren't working. There was an ATM run. Okay? And you can't get your money out. So if you have under pound 100,000, you're going to lose 10% of your money. Of course, the people over pound 100,000, they don't have the same kind of challenges or issues that everybody else does. Now, it's kind of misleading because, it was said that there are a lot of Russian oligarchs that had their money in these Cypriot banks. Probably people like Abramovich and those guys. But they're not going to suffer. Even if they had to pay 10%, they've got so much wealth that it doesn't really matter. And guess what? All those people with pound 100,000 and their 10%, who do you think is going to get paid first? It'll be the oligarchs. Because once everything clears up and the dust clears, the oligarchs say, we're just going to take our money out of your bank. And then you're really screwed. So you better just, patch this up or let us slide. He who holds the goal makes the rules, right? So anyway, there is a significance. Just think about this. Let's just say, for instance, you have 70,000 pounds in a Cypriot bank. And when those banks open on Tuesday, tomorrow, you're going to have 10% less, right? 7,000 pounds. 7,000 pounds is a lot of money. Here in America, it's like 14 grand, $14,000. You're going to have $14,000, or roughly around $12,000. $12,000 taken out of your account. And then what? Are you going to keep your money there? See, this is what's interesting, right? Because after the smoke clears, people are going to be so pissed off, they're going to pull their money out anyway. So they've got a long-term problem here. It's not like they're just going to take the money and, by the way, that 10% is just going to be, it's just going straight to the people that loan them the money, which doesn't exist anyway. It's all a figment. It's all a promise to pay based on zeros and ones. And it's all being propped up by cancerous, toxic debt, which is negative money. Negatively amortized money is what's being loaned on. This is a crisis, potentially, of epic proportion because of the way the global economy has been rigged, especially the euro. The Eurozone is in trouble now because this could have a significant domino effect on every other country in Europe. Why? Because people in those countries are going to look at what happened in Cyprus, and they're going to stroke their beards, and they're going to say, maybe I should take my money out, right? If you've got money in a bank in Spain or money in a bank in Italy or even to some extent a bank in France, are you going to keep your money in that bank after seeing what happened here? I think it's pretty doubtful. So then what happens if we have a bank run in Europe and people pull their money out of banks? Well, then it's a forest fire. It is a forest fire of epic proportion because then we're dealing with a global crisis. Everything is so wired together. A few months back, I sent out a newsletter, and I talked about the EU and why the EU was formed. And the EU was formed not for some long-term, long-standing kind of organization and group that could somehow compete with the United States and other countries on a trade level. The EU was formed so that all the banks in Europe would be interconnected, and so that every economy in Europe would rise and fall simultaneously. and that if the economy was going to fall, Europe would fall, or at least the banking aspect of the EU would fall. And I'm of the opinion that that's why it was started, so they could take down all these countries, not just bring them into some kind of group or association and strip their their history and their homogeneity. Although that's part of it, really the EU was a big scam to at some point in time clean out every single bank in Europe simultaneously. So I think we might be approaching that event horizon, and then what happens? Well, then it's going to have the domino effect, and if you're living in the United States, you want to pay attention. You want to pay close attention to what's happening, because you need to read the tea leaves. You need to stay alert. You need to stay prepared. You need to be able to move on anything that looks relatively suspicious in terms of your savings or your assets being threatened. And it could happen in the flash of an eye, okay? So I am here. I am the voice of reason. I am telling you right now that if you have the ability, you may want to hedge where your money is to make sure that you have some of it close by, just in case these things occur. Now, one of the things that we've seen over the last few months is a rise in the expenditures of the Department of Homeland Security buying things like bullets and big armored vehicles, and wondering why that's taking place. Also on the purchase list are C-ration meals, lots of them. For who are those C-ration meals for? So apparently, people within the power structure are putting together a plan for when something goes wrong. And if they're putting together a plan, you might consider putting together your own plan, just in case. Follow suit. So here we are. It is the 18th of March. We passed the Ides of March just a few days ago. Moved through it. The new Pope is here, pretty much. I'm working on a pretty significant piece on my newsletter. I'm about 10 text pages into this thing, and I'm probably about maybe 4 or 5. So if you're waiting for the newsletter, hang in there, because there's a ton. There's so much resonance happening with this new Pope. Let me just give you one tasty little bit. When he was announced, at that, when the white smoke came out on the 13th, at that time, there was a yod, or an eye of God, right? The eye of God. There was a yod happening astrologically, and it's with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Gemini duality, and the 8th house bordering on the cusp of the 9th. But right next to Jupiter is Aldebaran, the star Aldebaran. It's at 9 degrees Gemini. Now, what's interesting is that we're reading this from the astrological system, right? If you read it from the constellation system, there's 13 constellations, 12. Aldebaran gets pushed back into the sign of Taurus. And Aldebaran is really, it is in the sign of Taurus. So we read it here astrologically as Gemini, but it's really in Taurus, right? You follow my drift? Because astrology and astronomy are different cats, different breeds. This is why Ophiuchus comes up every 6 years. Aldebaran is the bullseye. It is the bullseye, okay? And the finger of God is pointed right at the bullseye. And the bullseye, or the bull, is Baal. It is Baal. It is Mammon. All right? You understand what I'm saying? If you go back and look at the Super Bowl ritual with Beyonce, which was a ritual of light, very unlike Madonna's ritual, which was, Cecil B. DeMille. It was a Cecil B. DeMille esoteric Super Bowl ritual. Beyonce's ritual was about light. And if you slow down the frames in her ritual, you'll find very interesting images. And one of the images that's in there is the bullseye. So there is Taurus imagery in the Super Bowl ritual. Beyonce does a video called "Girls Rule," I believe, and there's a nod to Taurus also in that video. So we see here at that moment in time, there's the eye of God headed straight to the bullseye, and the bull is Baal. It is the beast. What is the new pope known for? Well, he's a Jesuit. By the way, he took his Jesuit vows on 3/11/1958, and on 3/11/2013, 55 years later, conclave starts. He took his vows of poverty on April 22nd, and I believe that was in 1961. So we're coming up on April 22nd, which should be interesting. 55 years later. Keep that in mind. You look at Psalm 55. So it's an interesting psalm, and Psalm 55 actually has bits of prophecy in it. If you look at it, it's very, very close to the tenor of our times. Maybe I'll read it later. So the Pope is a Jesuit, but he's taken a Franciscan name. He's adopted a Franciscan attitude, theoretically. And what were the Franciscans known for? Well, the Franciscans were known for not having anything. I mean, they walked around and basically were, enraptured with the spirit of Christ, imitation of Christ, and, took shelter where they could and got food where they could and, spread the gospel, and that was their lot. That was their lot in life, and they were very happy. They were hugging lepers and, dancing with wolves. I mean, it was a merry bunch. But they were really all about poverty. And just days after they named the Pope, what happens? They start this run on banks in Cyprus, which is a precursor to the economics that are about to come. Austerity. This Pope is known for austerity. He is here to usher in a period of global poverty. That's his job. He's here to have people buy into this whole notion that you don't need very much. Okay? Basically it's a mind control move. That's why he was chosen. And this is the path that he's had for a while. So it's not like he just put on his hair shirt and decided to, take on vows of poverty. It's what he's known for. So this is what he is here to transmit to the world. Be poor and be okay with it. The Spirit of God is with you. The Spirit of God is great. The Spirit of God is rich. Meanwhile, don't worry about these other guys taking your money. You'll be closer to God as a result of it. Let them take it. It's okay. Your mansion is in heaven with the Lord. That's his role. It's part of it. He only has one lung, by the way, which I find interesting. I don't think he's going to last long as Pope. I don't know if he's Petrus Romanus. There's a big debate about that. There's a lot of people trying to fit things together so that he appears to be that guy. But I'll tell you what, he is here to usher in an era of poverty. That's why he's here. He's also got some skeletons in his closet. We talked a little bit about that on Friday's show. And some of the things that happened with some fathers in Argentina during the disappeared period and how he did not stand up for them during that time. He also worked at a chemical engineering company, Hekethier Bachmann, which I find interesting. That was his job, right? He was a chemical engineer. What a fascinating job for a pope to have, don't you think? Chemical engineer. I wonder what he worked on. They said it was in food, whatever the hell that means. So the other thing that's interesting about the Pope, and again, I get into this in the newsletter, is that at the time of conclave, the magical white smoke moment, again, this is a little bit different than what's happening astrologically, but astronomically, the constellation Cygnus was just at the horizon of Vatican City. Okay? Cepheus, constellation Cepheus, was just over Vatican City. Now, what's interesting about Cepheus is that Cepheus is the ancient king of Ethiopia, King Cepheus, whose wife was the vain Cassiopeia and whose daughter was the beautiful Andromeda, who Cepheus had pledged to Perseus. However, Perseus, when he came to collect Andromeda, Cepheus went back on his word and denied Perseus her hand. So Cepheus is a promise breaker. Keep that in mind. Cygnus is interesting because Cygnus, when you look at Cygnus in the galaxy, Cygnus is the all-seeing eye. It's the all-seeing eye of the galaxy. And there's creation myths about the swan of Cygnus traveling to Earth and bringing these cosmic particles of creation and seeding the entire planet with them. It's interesting stuff. Cygnus plays a huge role in creation myths. But it is the all-seeing eye. So here we have on the horizon of Vatican City the all-seeing eye, and here we have in the finger of God, sometimes it's called the eye of God too, by the way, the Yod, pointing right at Aldebaran, which is the bull's eye. So here we have these reflective imageries of the eye as it relates to this Pope. So it'll be interesting. He was elected, obviously, under Mercury retrograde. Mars was at 29 degrees Pisces. It was not quite yet at Aries. He will, if all things considered move forward, he will be confirmed under Mars in Aries. We talked about this on Friday, and he comes from Buenos Aires, so there's a connection with Mars here. But at that moment when they named him, it was Mars in Pisces. Now again, you have to understand it's at 29 degrees Pisces, which is the end of Pisces. This symbolizes the end of the Piscean age. So theoretically, he could be the last Pope at 29 degrees Mars Pisces. But he will reign under Mars and Aries, who knows for how long, which of course is the sign of war. So keep your eyes on the end of May, coming up on that very quickly. That's when we have the first square, 2 squares this year exact squares between Pluto and Uranus. Mars is also in play at that time. It'll be further out, but Mars is definitely in play. The end of May, I think Mars at that point in time is in Taurus. I'd have to check the degree. But that's a big time. It is a huge time, that square. Okay, so I guess the moral of the story to the kids, let me just read this before we go. I'm going to read you this. This will give you, I'm jumping back now. I'm jumping back to Cyprus. This is from the Mail Online. This gives you some kind of idea. And this will give you kind of an insight into how the British are dealing with this. Okay. Osborne vows to protect Britain's armed forces in Cyprus as cash machines are emptied and 60,000 British savers face losing millions in 10% bank account tax. So here's the bullet points. Lines formed at ATMs as people scramble to pull their money out. Word spread that rescue package included one-off levy on deposits, restrictions stopping people emptying accounts or money moving abroad. Up to 3,000 British service personnel are based on the bankrupt island. President Nikos Anastasiadis agreed to raid with European finance chiefs. So the European finance chiefs are the guys that thought of this. The president of Cyprus agreed, thought it was a good idea. But expats accuse the island of plain theft as island protests sparked. Britons have about 1.7 billion of deposits on the island and could lose up to 170 million pounds. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of fish and chips. Parliamentary official vote scheduled for today, pushed back to tomorrow. George Osborne vowed today that those serving in Britain's military government in Cyprus will be protected after European finance chiefs ordered an unprecedented raid on personal bank accounts. Up to 60,000 British savers are to lose thousands of pounds each as expats in Cyprus have their savings decimated in part of a painful bid to bail out the bankrupt island. The Chancellor said the financial situation in Cyprus was an example of what happens if you don't show the world that you can pay your way, adding, "We are not part of the bailouts." Oh, great. Just pass your costs on to everyone else. Says restrictions have been imposed to stop people emptying their accounts on moving their money out of the country following the deal with Eurozone finance ministers, under which ordinary citizens' deposits will be directly raided for the first time. One furious expat said, "This is plain theft. I'd love to hear someone explain to me why it isn't." So I guess this is a community of Brits that are living down there, cheaper probably than in England, warmer weather. And one of the 3,000 British service personnel based on the island said, "I stand to lose pound 4,000 that we've tried to save quite hard while we are here. That's been thrown back in our faces." It says here, furious, Shirley Brooks, who's originally from Manchester, said she stands to lose pound 18,600 of her retirement money. So exactly, that's right around the figure I was talking about, wasn't it? Right around there. That's about right. This is what I was talking about earlier. If savers in other troubled nations feared their accounts might be next, they could withdraw their money and spark a catastrophic run on the banks. That's exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. You need to pay attention to that. You need to keep your eyes on it. And it's a tricky place because if you do it and get your money out, you're participating with the collapse. And if you don't, and if you hold your money in there, you may lose it anyway. They may just shut the bank down. So we're at a very tenuous time. There's another guy, his name is Andy Georgiou. He's 32. He grew up in Liverpool. He says, "We are struggling and we can't access money and we need it to buy petrol and food. It's appalling, all without any warning." Steve Chamberlain, a 39-year-old writer from Devon, who now lives in Cyprus, said there are a lot of people who are very angry. Everyone was furious and absolutely betrayed by yet another apparently incompetent government. Folks, it's not incompetence. It is not incompetence. When are people going to wake up? Government has been hiding under the dunce cap of incompetence for far too long. This is conscious and egregious theft. And it's planned. It's not incompetent. It's planned. The competence still gives people this kind of out, right? It gives this out. Because humans are incompetent, they're not evil. Shirley Brooks, 61, we talked about her, originally from Manchester. She said, I'm extremely angry. This is our retirement money, and there was no warning that this was coming. I don't think we should have to pay anything, as we did not cause the problems in the economy. Well, first of all, Shirley, they're never going to give you a warning. If they give you a warning, you're going to pull your money out. And guess what? You're not going to get any of it. Her sentiments were echoed by former Army Officer Graham Smith, who moved to Cyprus from Dundee 5 years ago. I don't believe we Brits should have any money taken, he said. We have not contributed to the bankruptcy. If anything, all we've done is contribute to the economy. He stands to lose about £2,000. That's nothing compared to Miss Brooks. Steve Carr, he's going to lose about £2,000. He's from York, but he's now living in Limassol. He's been there for the past 24 years. He said the supposed solution to the audience woes could make matters worse. When the banks reopen, people will start moving their money out of Cyprus. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, Steve's a financial advisor. He should know. So this is an issue, ladies and gentlemen. This is an issue. It's not going to go away. And and I guess the only good thing is that gold is up. Gold went up to 16K. So if you want to find out more about this, there's tons of information on the internet. Go to the Mail online at dailymail.co.uk and just type in Cyprus, and you'll get plenty of juicy info. And the more knowledge you have, I think the better off, hopefully, you are. All right, that's it for today's show. I will see you all on Wednesday for Navigating the Astrological Matrix. 2 hours of deep astrology now that we're out of Mercury retrograde. It's all good. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart, when it's possible, and keep your eyes on the prize, which is your hard-earned shekels, and make sure that they stay as close to you as possible in tricky and challenging times. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you on Wednesday.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.